Good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. You, good morning, good morning to you and many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope that you're having a great and wonderful day. All right. Welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles. Today is Thinking Thursday, and we have been in the book Failures of Forgiveness, What We Get Wrong, and How to Do Better. We have been really on the kick of understanding forgiveness. What does it actually mean to forgive someone? What are the conditions? What are the limitations? How has forgiveness played out in a public square or with a nation? We looked at that in the last chapter with the council or the tribune that went down in South Africa. And we are on to the next chapter entitled When Race Matters in Forgiveness. The book that we're reading from is Failures of Forgiveness by Dr. Maisha Cherry. Typically, our reading in this space is going to come from nonfiction works and usually peer reviewed and researched works. All right. So if you want to know what kind of books we're reading over here, researched and peer reviewed works. All right. Dr. Cherry begins in this chapter to talk about the ramifications around asking Black victims to forgive, and specifically asking them too soon in their grief process to forgive. We're moving into the um, the subject of lopsided and topsy turvy, and when the past and the present shape our meaning and what it means to forgive. So we're going to do some reading, and then we'll move over to our Instagram page, which is at Daring Dialogues, to have the talk back. So if you're interested in coming on screen, I know some people just want to listen because they just enjoy books being read out loud. That's fine. So you just want to listen, that's fine. But if you're interested in making commentary or giving me your thoughts on the reading, we have what's called the talkback, which happens on Instagram. We are live right now on Instagram and YouTube, but the talkback portion happens on Instagram. So I want my YouTubers to understand that so that when we log out on YouTube, we're still live on Instagram if you want to hear the talkback. Okay? And again, the Instagram handle is at Daring Dialogues. So let's listen in and see what she has to say. Lopsided and topsy-turvy. Forgiveness requests in the hurry and bury ritual are also lopsided, by which I mean that they typically occur when only when certain actors are the victims. As the examples at the beginning of this chapter have indicated, many such requests occur when the victims are Black and the perpetrators are non-Black, or were acting on behalf of a law enforcement agency. In high profile cases where the victims are white and the perpetrators are Black, the ritual is often missing. For instance, No one ever asked the victims of Chris Dorner's 2013 revenge shooting or Michael Johnson's 2016 shooting of Dallas police officers and civilians if they could find it in their hearts to forgive these black perpetrators. Nor did reporters ask the family members of Justine Rushdick, a white Australian woman whom a black Muslim Minneapolis cop, Mohammed Noor, killed after she approached his squad car, if they would ever forgive Mohammed, whether he apologized or not. However, even if we vowed that we would make forgiveness requests to every victim, regardless of their and the perpetrator's race, sex, or class, the hurry and bury ritual would still involve an objectionable asymmetry. The meaning of public requests for forgiveness will depend on who is forgiving and who is receiving forgiveness. Asking about forgiveness in a context in which the victim is black and the offender is white and the wrongdoing is fatal violence has a different meaning than, for example, when the offender and victim are the same race, owing to the racial history, pattern of acts, and asymmetrical oppression and the power relations in the United States. Before we delve into these different meanings, let's look at what might motivate these lopsided requests. Reporters may be more likely to make forgiveness requests to blacks than to whites as a way of appealing to the agency of black victims. Once a crime has occurred, the power to prosecute the offender is in the state's hands, and in cases of police brutality, the power to reform internal policies is in the hands of the department. The reporter might understand that there is not much that black victims can do but forgive. The request might be a reminder of what the victim can actually do given eternal forces at work. The request may also be an appeal to the Christianity of black victims. Reporters often preface public requests with an acknowledgement of the religious faith of the victims, and victims often announce their forgiveness as a Christian obligation. Empirical evidence shows that blacks are more religious than whites and women are more religious than men. Recognizing the relationship between Christianity and its emphasis on forgiveness, the requester may be appealing appropriately to the victim's faith. We might take seeing black victims profess their religion in public as a reliable sign that it is morally permissible to make forgiveness requests of them. When the reporter shares the victim's religious convictions and their moral framework more broadly, they may be appealing on behalf of a fellow Christian. When the reporter does not share the victim's religious convictions, the forgiveness request might be thought of as a way to respect their beliefs. Reporters also make these lopsided requests owing to the heightened and public stakes of the wrongdoing. Given the racial nature of some of the causes, they may remind us that racial injustices are not only historical, but very much part of our present. They may force us to talk about race. They may lead us to interrogate claims of social and institutional progress, and they may make us consider the possibility of civil disorder and disruption if we fail to make progress. These stakes are not as salient in cases where there are black offenders and white victims, or in cases of white violence enacted upon non-black victims. However, for the same reason, when black forgiveness is publicly requested in response to white violence, the request also has a different significance and meaning. This is the third feature of the ritual, or recall, those in the hurry and bury ritual are motivated by the reparative aims of relief, release, and reconciliation. However, given the U.S. racial context and the race of the victims and offenders in these cases, we might want to look more closely at what implicitly or explicitly we are asking to be relieved of or released from when we make these requests, and for whom we are seeking release or relief. Many Black Americans, including myself, already know the answer to these questions. And those of you who are coming in, good morning. We are reading from Failures of Forgiveness, What We Get Wrong and How to Do Better by Dr. Maisha Cherry. When the past and present shape meaning. What interferes Or what inferences can Black victims reasonably draw from these forgiveness requests, given the U.S. racial past and present, and the request's quick, lopsided nature? For many, the answer is that these requests seek relief from white discomfort, release from moral action, and superficial repair. Black victims can reasonably infer that the hurry and bury ritual is implicitly about relief of white discomfort. Robin DiAngelo describes this need to escape racial discomfort as white fragility in her book of the same title. Whites are often protected from discussing race and therefore develop an expectation for racial comfort. They do not carry the psychic burden of race because they do not often think about it, nor do they have to. Race, from their perspective, is thought to reside in people of color. As a result, they typically do not develop the stamina to think and talk about race like other racial groups do. Now, this is Dr. Uh, Robin DiAngelo's assessment, and Robin DiAngelo is a white woman. This is her assessment on what she's come to the conclusion of about her own race. When whites are confronted with racial issues, they typically lack the ability to handle the accompanying stress, and they experience painful feelings of guilt. This confrontation violates the code that says whites should be comfortable, and this disequilibrium can become intolerable. As a result, many whites will seek to avoid or extricate themselves from the stress inducing situation. Seen in this context, the forgiveness request that accompanies this hurry and bury ritual is simply a manifestation of the underlying desire to escape this discomfort. The requester may be acting on their own behalf if they're white, or on behalf of other whites, regardless of the race of the requester. The forgiveness request can be read as a way to escape the racial discomfort that white violence and Black victimhood have introduced. If the victim forgives, we can all just move on from the uncomfortable race conversation. It's called the hurry and bury ritual for a reason. White discomfort departs when we introduce forgiveness. Unfortunately, this move ensures that we do not deal with the underlying racism and injustice that gave rise to the wrongdoing in the first place. This kind of request suggests that what is of utmost concern is not really the Black victim, but the emotional tranquility of the requester and the white public at large. The requester has put a premium on his humanity at the expense of the humanity of the Black person who has been victimized. We can imagine the request being put in more explicit terms. Make me more comfortable, please. Stop talking about race. But white and state violence in cases like the ones I raised cannot be easily separated from discussions about race. Race is embedded in them. The request, which praises white discomfort over Black pain, is insensitive and disrespectful. The requester is using the Black victim as a means to an end. He is using the victim to make him feel better as a white person under the moral notion of forgiveness. But Blacks are not tools to be used to satisfy our own desires. They, like all humans, should be treated well because they are human. The inferred meaning manifests disrespect because the requester is showing an indifference to Black pain. The meaning of the request implies that Black victimization at the hands of white violence does not matter, or at least it does not matter as much as comforting white people. And to say that Black victimization does not matter is to suggest that Black victims have little or no moral status. But we all have equal moral status as a human being and as persons. To act as if we do not is to show race-based disrespect. Requesting forgiveness can also be a way of ducking individual responsibility for making any decision and acting. In response to white violence, the request may be implicitly asking not what we can do for them, but what Blacks can do for us during this tense political time. To request forgiveness from the families of Black victims is to leave the responsibility of responding to Black people, particularly Black women. The request does not ask fellow citizens whether they have failed to take action to prevent or lessen the problem of violence or what they could do in the future, such as make institutional or private appeals. The request serves to reinforce a whole system of race-based labor. The request treats blacks as underlings, people who work on behalf of whites. They are asking victims to do all the work required to make things better by forgiving. While deferring to the actions of blacks may seem to be granting them agency, overloading black people with burden fails to treat them as equals. Instead, it reinforces the existing racial hierarchy. And in the case of black women, it also reinforces a gender hierarchy. Designating blacks to take on the labor required to fix our racial problems is a manifestation of race based disrespect that puts blacks in a no win situation. If they accede to the request, then they signal that the problem has been solved. If they refuse the request to forgive, then attention often becomes focused on their refusal to help, quote unquote, heal the rift in a racially divided country, instead of on the racial violence that motivated the request. The request thus says that blacks, even when they are victims, are still the source of the problem. Victims can also reasonably infer that forgiveness requests in the hurry and bury ritual are requests for merely superficial repair. Forgiveness requests often present a misleading picture of current race relations by depicting racial violence as isolated rather than as systemic, and racism as a thing of the past rather than an ongoing problem. For instance, the newspaper headlines penned in response to the Charleston massacre, "We forgive you, hate won't win." And another headline, "What it takes to forgive a killer," implying that this violent act is an aberration. We've just slipped on the road to racial progress, but we are making progress, aren't we? And if white and state violence interrupts the picture that America is beyond its racial past, a nation can view forgiveness requests as the glue that mends the picture. Blacks can therefore infer that requests for forgiveness merely aim to repair the appearance of harmony rather than address the deeper social problems. In addition to being disrespectful, these lopsided superficial requests for forgiveness are also self-defeating. They stand in the way of forgiveness and repair because they are likely to make victims resistant to forgiveness. In a democracy, some citizens will be asked to sacrifice more than others. But as the political theorist Danielle Allen points out in Talking to Strangers, the challenge in a democracy is to take turns at sacrifice. Old habits of citizenship entail assigning to one group all the work of being sovereign and to another group most of the work of accepting the losses that kept the polity stable. Good habits of citizenship entail understanding the need for taking turns at losses as well as gains. A victim may be resistant to lopsided requests because it assigns their group all the work of forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation. Given the disrespectful messages implied by public requests for forgiveness, that blacks' interests matter less than white interests, that blacks are solely responsible for healing our country, and that blacks should conceive acts of violence as just these isolated events. Self-respecting victims may be resistant to forgiving. They might reasonably think that by forgiving, they would be endorsing the view that they are inferior. Refusing to forgive may be a way of resisting such claims. If this sounds right, those of us who are tempted to make public requests have reason to do things differently. Well, she has certainly said a mouthful. And being that this book was published in, let's see, let me go back to when it was published. It is a recent publication. This book was published in 2023, but everything she's saying applies right now. Because I see lots of requests of people saying they're sorry and asking Black Americans to forgive them for the choices that have been made in this recent election. Yeah, it's lots of lopsided requests going on for healing, for forgiveness, for reconciliation, for making things right, for holding the country together, and all of that other stuff. And I want to challenge us as she's going to do in her next section here, to use our words more constructively. Rather than asking Black people to forgive what has happened, you fill in the blank. Rather than asking marginalized communities to forgive you, or running into marginalized spaces saying, I'm one of the good ones. As I said on my page this week earlier, if you are a good white person, if you are a good person, if you are a good human being, now is your time to shine. This next 4 years, you get to prove how good of a human being you are. You get to prove your goodness in the next 4 years by what you do, by the decisions you make, by what you resist, by what you won't tolerate in your own community, home circles, school boards, jobs. This is your time to shine. Take it in. Think about, how am I going to shine as a good person? How am I going to shine as a good human being? How am I going to shine as a morally upright human being who absolutely detests tyranny? This is your time to shine. The spotlight will be on you. If you're running around saying that you're a good person and you're one of the ones, this will be your time to shine. So make sure you take advantage of it and shine. Shine bright. Do what you can to demonstrate that you're the good person that you've been running around telling everybody on social media that you are. All right? Okay. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. It has been Thinking Thursday. I really like the fact that Dr. Cherry is breaking down these components of forgiveness, letting us know that we don't need to get into the practice of hurry and bury. Make sure we're not doing that to people in our life, where we're asking them to hurry into their process so that we can bury how we feel about their process and their reaction. All right. If you would like to join us for the talk back, again, it's on IG at Daring Dialogues. And all you have to do is, I believe, click the two-person button or the camera, and we will bring you on so you can give us your thoughts about forgiveness. Do you find yourself rushing into forgiveness? Do you find yourself taking a moment to think about what has happened to you? Is there a process for your forgiveness? Or do you just freely forgive, as they say? Do you find yourself wondering, is this a condition under which I should be forgiving? Let us know your thoughts by joining us on at Daring Dialogues on Instagram. Until tomorrow, take care, be well, and be light.